For more than 300 years, millions of Africans were forced across the Atlantic as slaves. But in the early 1800s, something unexpected happened. Ships began making the journey in the opposite direction. On board were thousands of Black Americans. Many had once been enslaved. Now they were traveling back to Africa, not as captives, but as settlers. Their mission was bold: build a brand new country, a country that still exists today, a country called Liberia. But the real story behind how Liberia was created is far more complicated than most people realize. By the early 1800s, the United States faced a problem many white Americans didn't want to confront. Slavery still existed in the South, but thousands of Black people were already free. Some had bought their freedom. Some had been freed by slave owners. Others were born free. By 1810, nearly 200,000 free Black people were living in the United States, and their presence made many powerful people uncomfortable. Some feared free Black communities would inspire enslaved people to rebel. Others believed Black and white Americans could never live equally in the same society. So in 1816, a group of politicians, slaveholders, and religious leaders formed an organization called the American Colonization Society. Their idea was radical: send free Black Americans to Africa. Supporters claimed this would give freed slaves a chance to build their own nation. But critics saw something darker. Many believed the real goal was simply to remove free Black people from America. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to support the channel. Tap the like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves history. It really helps more people discover these stories that often get left out of the history books. And if you subscribe, you won't miss the next deep dive. In 1820, the first ship left the United States carrying freed Black settlers to Africa. The voyage was long and dangerous. Disease spread quickly aboard the ship. Some passengers never made it to land. When the survivors finally arrived on the West African coast, they faced a new challenge. The land was unfamiliar, the climate was harsh, and malaria was deadly. Within the first few years, many settlers died from disease. Yet the survivors pressed forward. They believed they were building something historic, a homeland. The settlers established their first colony on a small island called Providence Island. From there, they began building towns along the coast. Over time, more ships arrived. More freed Black Americans joined the settlement. They named the territory Liberia. The word literally means land of the free. The settlers built schools, churches, and farms. They created courts. They wrote laws. And eventually they built a capital city called Monrovia, named after US President James Monroe. To the settlers, Liberia represented something powerful, a chance to prove that people who had once been enslaved could govern themselves. But the new country looked surprisingly familiar. Liberia's flag closely resembled the American flag. The government was modeled after the United States. The settlers spoke English. They wore Western clothing. They built Protestant churches and American-style schools. In 1847, Liberia declared independence. It became one of the first Black republics in the world. Its first president was Joseph Jenkins Roberts, a free Black man born in Virginia. It was an extraordinary moment in history. Former slaves had built their own nation, but the story didn't end there. In many ways, it was only beginning. Because there was one huge complication. Liberia wasn't empty. For centuries, the region had been home to many indigenous groups: the Kru, the Bassa, the Grebo, the Vai, and many others. Together, these communities made up the overwhelming majority of the population, but they were largely excluded from the new government. The settlers, later called Americo-Liberians, held most of the political power, even though they were a small minority. Over time, a social hierarchy formed. At the top were the Americo-Liberians. Below them were the indigenous populations, and the gap between the two groups grew wider. The settlers had once been victims of slavery and discrimination. Yet in Liberia, they became the ruling elite. They controlled the government, the economy, and most of the land. Many indigenous Liberians were denied full citizenship. Some were forced into labor systems that critics compared to slavery. It was a strange and tragic twist of history. People who had fled oppression in America had created a new system of inequality in Africa. As Liberia expanded its territory along the coast, conflicts increased. Indigenous communities resisted the growing authority of the government. There were battles, raids, and occasional massacres. Yet, despite these tensions, the Americo-Liberian elite maintained control for more than a century. From 1847 to 1980, Liberia was dominated by this small ruling class. In 1980, everything changed. A group of soldiers led by Samuel Doe, a member of the indigenous Kran ethnic group, launched a military coup. They stormed the presidential mansion. President William Tolbert was killed, and for the first time in Liberian history, the Americo-Liberian ruling class lost power. But the coup did not bring stability. Instead, Liberia entered decades of political turmoil and civil war. The story of Liberia is one of the most unusual in world history. A country founded by freed slaves, built on the dream of freedom, yet shaped by many of the same struggles that exist everywhere. Power, identity, belonging. Liberia's history reminds us of something important. Freedom alone doesn't guarantee justice. Building a nation is complicated, and even the most hopeful experiments can carry the weight of the past. But Liberia still stands today, more than 175 years after its founding. A country born from one of the most extraordinary migrations in human history.